Hookham came at him in a scuffle outside a meeting in the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Mr Hookham has denied punching Mr Wolf and even posted a photograph of his hands on Twitter. Well, the party is holding an internal inquiry, which I mentioned, which should report by the end of this week. It all comes as the party is on the search for a new leader. That following the shock resignation of Diane James last week. I think she was in the post for about 18 days. Let's take a look at the runners and riders. So, despite last week's incident, Stephen Wolf, who's 49, is still officially in the race. He's been an MEP since 2014 and is the party's spokesman on immigration. He confirmed his candidacy before he ended up in hospital, and he's still the favourite. William Hill put his odds at 8 to 11 to win. The next candidate is Raheem Kassam, 30 years old. He's the editor at Breitbart News and is a former advisor to Nigel Farage. He's also officially declared, and his odds with William Hill are 8 to 1. Next up is Bill Etheridge, who is 46 years of age. He's been an MEP since 2014 and is also a UKIP councillor in the West Midlands. He confirmed his candidacy on the Sunday Politics yesterday, but at the moment his odds are long at 50 to 1. And finally, will Suzanne Evans throw her hat into the ring? She's the party's former deputy chairman and a former councillor. She was suspended from the party but has now been readmitted and says she is carefully considering a bid for the leadership. William Hill have her odds at 3 to 1. I'm thinking of changing my job and going to the bookmakers. Joining me now to discuss this is Liz Jones. She was a contender in the previous leadership election and she also sits on UKIP's National Executive Committee. We don't have your odds, it seems. Anyway, are you standing?
At the moment, I'm undecided. I'll decide by the end of this week.
What's going to convince you?
I think I want to see how the turbulence passes. Last week was pretty turbulent. I want to see how things fall into place.
Or do you just want to know whether or not Stephen Wolf will actually be allowed to stand in the leadership contest?
Well, because I'm on the National Executive Committee, if I have to play a significant role in that, I will then have to recuse myself from the leadership challenge, clearly. So it all depends what happens, really, with the report on Friday, how the investigations pan out and what level of involvement NEC members will have to play in that process.
All right, well, looking at that long list, who are you most enthused about?
I haven't seen their policies yet. I don't know what their external and internal...
You know them, don't you?
I do know them.
You know who they all are.
I do know them. However, things change. I don't know what Raheem Kassim's policies are going to be. I don't know what Suzanne Evans' policies are going to be. And frankly, I question whether all of those people that you've just mentioned would be able to stand in any event.
Right, why?
Well, there's strict rules about standing as a UKIP leadership candidate. Number one, you have to pay a £5,000 deposit, and if you don't recover more than 5% of the vote, you will lose that £5,000. So
and do you think that will then preclude some of these people standing?
It may possibly. It's a risk. It's a financial risk.
I should also mention Paul Nuttall is standing. I think we're certainly considering standing. What about him?
I don't know if he's standing as yet. We have been in conversation with him. If he does stand, I should imagine he would be probably a firm favourite.
Right. I spoke to Jonathan Arnott on Friday about the altercation between the two MEPs. He thinks neither should be, I don't think Mike Hookham is actually going to, but he thinks neither should be allowed to stand. What do you say to that?
I say to that until we know exactly what happened, and we don't as yet, we don't even know if it was a physical altercation, it may just simply have been a verbal altercation, we don't know. Until we have the detailed information involving the witness statements, I can't possibly comment. Of course, if this were an employment situation, both of them would be suspended pending the resolution of the investigation.
Is that what should happen? I mean, you're on the NEC, as you said. Do you agree that the party's been brought into disrepute?
The party has had a large amount of unfortunate publicity. I wouldn't necessarily say it's been brought into disrepute because on the 7th of October, last week, in Hartlepool, we won a local election seat. We got 49%, and we are now the opposition, I think, in Hartlepool.
Right.
Labour wins, but it's having no impact on our membership and our support base.
Well, it might be a bit too soon, but do you instinctively think it did and has brought the party into disrepute? Having two of your elected representatives, either, we don't know for sure, but certainly being involved in some sort of confrontation?
I would say it's more of a disappointment. I was very disappointed when Diane stood down. I would say this behaviour is very disappointing, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily bringing the party into disrepute. Let us not forget that there were 6 Labour MPs actually had criminal convictions for expenses fraud. 4 Labour Life peers were involved in selling interference with legislation.
Sure, but what I'm asking is about whether it's brought into disrepute, not how it compares to other parties. I'm not denying that other parties have had problems, but you obviously don't think it has brought the parties
I would say
into disrepute.
by comparison, I would say no. This is a minor little tittle-tattle incident.
I mean, Gerard Batten, your MEP in London, has said that regardless of the kerfuffle or confrontation, he says the fact that Stephen Woolf was in talks with the Conservatives about defecting to their party is in itself enough of a bar to him standing. Do you agree?
Again, until we have the facts, we need to be 100% sure that this has happened and that this is not just tittle-tattle.
But if it is proven that he had talks, and he certainly was discussing the idea of defecting, I mean, he did say that himself, he certainly thought about it and considered it, would that be enough to bar him? Should it be enough to bar him?
It could be enough to suspend him so that he would be unable to contest the leadership candidacy. It may not be enough to necessarily bar him from the party. We don't know yet until we have all the facts.
But from standing for leadership?
It may well, if it can be proven 100% that that was the case and it's not just tittle-tattle or idle rumour, then potentially, yes, it could suspend him from standing as leadership candidate.
He's got his papers in 17 minutes late. This was for the first leadership election that Diane James won. Do you think that was a bit harsh by the NEC to then say he couldn't stand?
No.
Right.
Not at all,
Okay.
because it shows that the rules apply to everyone. You can be a senior member of the party or a junior, the rules will apply to you all.
Who does Labour fear most in terms of the next leader of UKIP, bearing in mind the gains they made in northern Labour heartlands?
I don't think it's a matter of fearing who leads UKIP. I think that we have to tackle UKIP at its source and tackle the rhetoric that comes out of the UKIP's head office and tackle their policies and tackle them rather than who we fear as the leader of UKIP.
So you don't particularly fear Stephen Woolf? I mean, as you know, during the referendum and in fact in the election in 2015, there were many Labour voters who decided to give their vote to UKIP.
I think there are many voters who have been dissatisfied with politics as a whole, and some of them may have voted UKIP. We have to ensure that we win their vote back, and that's the most important thing. And as I say, just tackling the underlying threat of parties such as UKIP.
Do you now regret, in terms of the reasons for calling the referendum in the first place, as you know, the accusation was it was fears of UKIP, fears of the right of your party. Now, looking at the way UKIP is at the moment, it's had, going to have 2 leadership contests. Diane James has stood down. There's been an altercation between 2 MEPs. Do you think you overreacted as a party?
No, I think it was absolutely right to hold the referendum. There was a clear demand out in the country, and I remember during the 2015 election campaign knocking on door after door, people saying they hadn't had their say for 40 years, they wanted to have their say, but they didn't actually believe that a Conservative government would deliver on it. And now the Conservative government has delivered on it. I think it was the right thing to do to listen to the will of the British people. Even though you lost, I know you said you were a reluctant Remainer, but of course you lost that vote. Well, if the British people don't support your position, you can't say that somehow it was invalid to hold the referendum in the first place.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.